I know. It's not that funny, but I don't get to do that a lot. It only works for people who see me, not just look at me, but see me. You are few and far between, mon chéri, believe you me. But you see it. That other side, not just the paint, but what's beneath it. Beneath the paint, that dark side, you see it. You saw it that first time. You see it every time that you come in here and we stare at each other. You get it. A thin line, an invisible border that separates the light from the dark, the sanity from the madness, the life from the death. God, I can be such a downer. People have always said that. Women, T, Margot, even Agostina, they all said I needed to lighten up. Easier said than done, my friend, when you spend your whole life walking on the edge of that border line. And being painted doesn't help. Paint is permanent. You try to be happy. You try to forget all the shit and change for the better. But you can't, because once it dries, paint isn't fluid. The brush stroke is forever. So you're stuck here with an that hurts like a motherfucker. And I would try and change the line, but it's not malleable like it is in life. No matter how much paint I piled on, it always turned out the same. But the frame is nice, isn't it? Gold leaf. Bougie for my taste, but whatever. The painting is nice, though. It's pretty nice. Self-portrait. Of course, you only know it's a self-portrait because I told you it is. Maybe I'm lying. Maybe I painted this bandage because I was short on red paint. Maybe I look nothing like this because I say it's me, you believe me. Yet another fine line we straddle. What is real and what isn't? Perception is reality. A painting is frozen. Yet here I am, having a perfectly nice chat with you, which you'd have to admit is real and unreal at the same time. N'est-ce pas? Wild, right? Life's nothing but a bunch of mental border crossings we are forced to make back and forth, our emotional passports being violently stamped as we pass over lines so thin that sometimes even our psyches don't know when we have gone too far until we die or go crazy. I know. Lighten up, Vincent. One time, when I was around 9, we were at the seaside down south. Me, my mom, my brother. I don't know where my father was. He hated the seaside, but he took us there every couple of years. I loved it. I loved to look out when the sea was calm and squint really hard and see if you could find that line between the water and the air. We'd spend all day there. I'd look for shells and bring the prettiest ones back to Mother. She would lay on a blanket and read her book under her parasol, and Theo and Zaza, our dog, and I would just play in the water all day. I loved everything about it, the sound of the waves, the seagulls, the smell of the salt in the air, the breeze off of the water. One day, I was walking along the shore, and I found this dead jellyfish. It was huge, these long tentacle things just trailing back into the water. I poked it with a stick. I had to. I had read that jellyfish didn't have a brain, but I didn't know how that could be possible. So I started to look for it. Started flipping the blob over in the sand, bending down, looking for the brain, and the waves were lapping at my ankles, and I was shielding my eyes from the morning sun, and I was looking and I was looking, but I couldn't find it. I, I couldn't comprehend how a creature could exist, could function without a brain. Nature is crazy, right? So I get down on my knees and I take a closer look. I mean, the thing was washed up. It's dead, but suddenly a wave pushes one of the tentacles up on shore and it wraps itself around my calf, and I
Oh.
feel it squeeze my leg ever so slightly. It wasn't dead. It was dying, but it wasn't dead. And before I could even understand what is happening, I feel it, the sting. It was like someone was holding my leg to a hot metal pipe, except I couldn't pull it away. I tried to scream, but that initial shock of pain was like being hit in the gut by a billy goat or something, like it pulled all the air out of my lungs. I lay at the edge of the water, and when I took a deep breath in, I got a mouthful of salt water. Another tentacle got washed up. It was closer to my thigh, and it wraps around it almost delicately, and then I feel the second sting. Even without a brain, this dying thing is fighting for its life, protecting itself in the only way it knows how, by instinct, a reflex, or something. Maybe my poking it with the stick brought it out. Made its choice, even without a brain, to use whatever energy it had left to attack the thing it sensed was dangerous. I lay sputtering, choking on salt water, couldn't feel my legs now. No pain, just no feeling. Trying to scream, trying to get enough air into my lungs to scream, and I could feel the poison climbing up my body. I am trying to drag myself out of the water, away from the waves that are licking my face, but my good leg, the one that hasn't been stung, is under my dead leg, and I didn't have enough strength to get it out of the wet sand. And I could see my mom, about 100 yards down the beach, sitting on her blanket, a parasol shielding her face from the morning sun. No one else is around. I mean, I don't see Theo, and I start to panic. It starts to become difficult to breathe, and I don't know if it's the venom or the panic, maybe both. I finally use all the strength that I had left to lift myself up onto my arms and try to call out to my mom, but again, nothing comes out, and I think that's it. That's it. I am dying. And this overwhelming sadness came over me for a split second, and I must have started to cry or moan or something, because the next thing I remember is Zaza barking. She's trying to pull me up by my waistband out of the water. Her barking made my mom sit up, and she runs over and she sits up, and I try to say thank you, but I am gasping for air. I am convulsing. I can feel my body jerking, and I can't control it. Such a strange feeling to not be in control of your body. Having some unseen force contracting your muscles and throwing you around like a piece of kelp being tossed in the ocean waves. She picked me up the best she could. I mean, I was small for 9, but even so, she wasn't a big woman. And she's whispering for me to stay with her, which I thought was funny, because where else would I go? I must have blacked out for a minute, because the next thing I remember is the feeling of hot sand on my back. She had laid me down next to the road while Theo ran for help. Sand felt so warm, soothing, until the convulsions started again. Shock, some men come running as they bundled me onto this old wooden cart and restrained me so I wouldn't hurt myself. And they shoved a piece of something hard in my mouth so I wouldn't swallow my tongue, but it made breathing even harder. I didn't know it then, but I had been stung about a dozen times. And the venom had worked its way up to my neck, and my throat was starting to swell shut, and here I was, gasping for breath with a piece of wood jammed in my mouth, and I thought, this is like drowning on land. And I smiled. My mother said I smiled. And then the cart started moving, and one of the men poured salt water on me and began plucking the tentacles off with a broken shell. And then suddenly it stopped. I could breathe. I was gasping for air like a fish that had just been caught. It tasted salty and moist, and I couldn't get enough. It took about an hour before I stopped gasping, my brother said. It was like I was afraid the supply of air would evaporate or something. And I can remember thinking about that dying jellyfish, how he refused to go out just washed up on the shore, how the waves came in with just the right movement to push that tentacle onto my leg, how if I hadn't needed to get a closer look, if I hadn't read about them having no brains, if I hadn't loved the beach so much, I would never have been as close to death as I got that day. How it's fate that sometimes kills you, or doesn't, just drags you right to the brink and says, look, rubs your face in it, brings you right to that border between life and death, and makes you realize it was all meant to be. All the pieces are laid out before you, and it makes perfect sense. You were meant to be here. You were meant to be here, and you didn't even know it until you realize you're about to die. And then it all makes sense, just as you take one last breath. Crazy. Ne sais pas?
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa, yeah.